What's up, everybody? This is Chris Surratt bringing you another edition of the Car Concierge Show, the show that helps with the buying, selling, maintaining, and repairing of your vehicle. On today's show, we're going to talk about Tesla Cybertruck as its sales declined so drastically that the Air Force has decided it's going to use a couple of Cybertrucks as target practice. Next, we're going to check out a story about, or we're going to go into our recall bag and go over to Jaguar and Land Rover as they recall a whole bunch of Range Rovers for a problem that you standardly wouldn't see in their suspension system. And last but not least, we're going to head over to Canada and we'll talk about the tariffs and how they're affecting Canada and all of the new moves that Canada has done to get over the hump of the tariffs that President Trump has put on them. Getting in cahoots with Mexico, trying to diversify their EV systems. So the tariffs are affecting Canada and Mexico alike, and we're going to see what's going to happen in the future when it comes to that. All right, so let's jump straight into it. Tesla. Now, Tesla, of course, with the Elon Musk situation and, the Doge situation and the lack of sales that Tesla has been going through as of late, they have been sitting on lots and lots of Cybertrucks sitting on their lots. It's probably becoming a fairly big problem for them. Just the sales numbers are really, really down, and all of the plans that Elon Musk had for the sales of Tesla just haven't come to fruition. So the Air Force has decided it is going to take this opportunity to get themselves a couple of Cybertrucks and use them as target practice, but for a fairly good reason. Let's check it out.
New at 5:30, the Air Force wants to buy 2 new Tesla Cybertrucks, then blow them up.
CBS 70's Bill Young explains the thinking of putting a 6-figure vehicle on the receiving end of a missile.
With its love it or hate it looks, Tesla Cybertruck, which initially saw long wait lists and high demand, well, they're now piling up on dealership lots. However, the U.S. Air Force wants to acquire 2 of them and then use them as missile targets. Multiple sources confirm the selection is because it is possible that unspecified adversaries could be driving them in the near future. The plan is to include the Cybertruck with 31 other target vehicles at the Air Force Test Center in New Mexico. A formal report from the test center zeroes in on the Cybertruck specifically, no pun intended, because of, quote, its design, materials, impact resistance, and innovative technologies. And while the typical price of a Cybertruck hovers in the $100,000 range, the ones that are going to be blown up, well, those don't have to be brand new or even in running shape for that matter. By the way, the other vehicles used are not nearly as specific, only unnamed sedans, trucks, and SUVs, though they must be certain colors just to make them stand out in the desert. I'm Bill Young, CBS 17 News.
All right, so what we know is that Tesla and their Cybertruck sales have been going down super duper bad. So, and what we can expect, matter of fact, let's go ahead. We're going to show one more video, and it's going to break down this same situation just a little bit more, talking about the kind of missiles, and that's pretty much why I wanted to show this video. But it also talks about what's going on with Tesla and its sales of the Cybertruck. So let's check this out real quick too.
Cybertrucks has been chosen by Air Force as missile targets. 2 Cybertrucks will be used as missile targets at White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico, part of a test program simulating real-world combat scenarios. Why Cybertrucks? Military procurement documents say it's about realism in a future conflict. Adversaries could use vehicles like these. The stainless steel exoskeleton and unique design have been found to sustain less damage than expected under heavy impact.
Which makes it a really good reason to use it, because with the sales down so low, you would expect that the prices for the vehicles are going to go down. People, companies are going to start buying them in bulk so they get good prices on them. And the fear would be that those companies, some using shell companies or anything like that, a adversary would buy a whole bunch of Tesla Cybertrucks and use them against the U.S. or use them in war times. So they're just trying to get ahead of the curve because they know how the Cybertruck looks and how it's designed and how everybody. The selling point for it was that the idea that it was kind of like a tank-like vehicle and it was going to keep you really safe from the outside. Well, they have to test out that, because if we get into a situation where our adversaries are using them to attack us, then we really have to have an idea on how to stop them. So it's twofold. You want to test out your missile systems and all those things on things that are said to be indestructible or hard to destroy. Let's check it out.
Making them ideal for testing modern precision weapons. This purchase is part of SOCOM's Standoff Precision Guided Munitions program, which trains U.S. Special Operations Forces to strike moving or mobile targets with pinpoint accuracy and minimal collateral damage. The program uses weapons like the AGM-114 Hellfire missile, AGM-176 Griffin, GBU-69B, small glide munition, and the GBU-39 BB laser. But here's the twist. The same vehicle being tested for toughness is struggling in the real market. Tesla sold just 4,306 Cybertrucks in Q2 2025, a 51% drop from the previous quarter. That's well behind Ford's F-150 Lightning at 5,842 units and GM's Hummer EV at 4,508. Annual sales are running at about 20,000 units, just 8% of Elon Musk's original target of 250,000 per year. Meanwhile,
8%. That has gotta hurt. 8% of his sales, what he wanted to sell, is just, that's gotta be a hurtful thing for him. I could see 50% or 30%, but 8%, the sales struggle. And of course, people have cooled off on EVs, they've cooled off on Teslas, they've cooled off on Cybertrucks, and it's just showing in the numbers. The market share is just not there, and people are really going back to gas-powered vehicles because, of all of these situations that we talk about all the time. The lack of infrastructure, the lack of the ability to charge correctly, charging at home being hit or miss. So, it's understandable that the military would decide to use this vehicle as target practice, but it's just unfortunate that it's being a U.S. automaker that is suffering in such a depressing time for the sales of the Cybertruck.
Tesla is sitting on nearly $200 million worth of unsold Cybertrucks across U.S. lots.
Wow.
The launch price of $60,990 was already far above the originally promised $39,900.
Yeah.
And 8 recalls in just 14 months, from faulty accelerator pedals to trim detachment, have eroded buyer confidence. For the Air Force, the deal is straightforward. They need non-functional but intact vehicles, bodies, glass, and mirrors included to simulate battlefield threats. The 2 Cybertrucks will be among 31 other vehicles, from pickups to SUVs, purchased for the same purpose. So while sales slow and inventory builds, at least some Cybertrucks have found a new role helping the military prepare for the next generation of warfare. Follow and subscribe for more. Level Field's Elite Investing.
Yeah, we know that what's going to truly happen is that the price of a Cybertruck, of course, is going to go down tremendously. And then at that time, people are going to start buying a lot more. They're probably going to buy, some places are going to buy in bulk. Some places are going to buy them to use as rental vehicles or for other terms. But now we know that the military is going to buy them as well, with the idea of making sure that they are prepared for an adversary getting a vehicle such as a Cybertruck and using it against us, because they touted the Cybertruck as just like a tank, keeping the person inside very protected. And we know that to be true. We've seen several people shooting at them with arrows and bullets and, all kinds of machinery. So we know that the vehicle is well put together to some degree, and the military just has to, dot all its I's and cross all its T's, and understand that if somebody, an adversary of some sort, uses a Cybertruck against them, that they have a way to stop it. So, good story. So let's keep going. Of course, let's jump into our recall bag, as we always try to do. Now, mind you, a lot of the recalls as of late have been Fords, your standard software update recalls that we're going to see a lot of in the next couple of months and years. But this is a unusual recall. This is a recall for the suspension system in a Range Rover. Let's check it out.
Major recall shock. Jaguar Land Rover pulls over 121,500 luxury SUVs in the U.S. Key highlights you need to know. 121,500 plus luxury SUVs recalled in the U.S. over a critical safety defect. Problem linked to the front suspension knuckle, a vital steering and stability component. Affected models include Range Rover and Range Rover Sport from multiple years. Potential accident risk if the defect is not fixed immediately. An HTSA U.S. safety regulator steps in after months of investigation. Jaguar Land Rover JLR, the British luxury automaker owned by Tata Motors, has just issued a massive recall affecting more than 121,500 vehicles across the United States. The reason? A potentially dangerous flaw in the front suspension knuckle, a critical part that connects the wheel to the suspension and plays a vital role in steering, braking, and overall stability. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and HTSA, this defect could cause the suspension knuckle to crack or fail under stress, especially during high-impact driving conditions. The failure could lead to a sudden loss of control, a nightmare scenario for any driver, let alone owners of high-performance luxury SUVs. The recall affects several model years of Range Rover and Range Rover Sport, with the earliest cases dating back to 2014. Investigations first began in June, targeting around 91,000 vehicles, but the scope has since expanded dramatically. Why this matters? Luxury SUVs like the Range Rover are often marketed.
So, real quick, the fact that they are taking this all the way back to 2014 tells us that this has been probably an ongoing problem, but it tells us that the problem doesn't happen right away. It's not a problem that is going to happen the first couple of years if you have in the vehicle. And it said that it's under stress, which means driving the vehicle. So obviously, as you drive the vehicle and it stresses out that knuckle, they're saying that the knuckle itself is just not made of a good enough material that it's going to withstand all of the stress of driving your vehicle on it.
For their off-road toughness and precision engineering. But this recall strikes at the heart of that promise, forcing owners to question just how premium their premium vehicle really is. JLR says it will notify owners and replace the faulty suspension parts free of charge. But until repairs are made, the safety risk remains real. When a brand synonymous with prestige and performance recalls over 121,500 vehicles for a core safety defect, it's more than just a headline. It's a wake-up call for the entire industry. Owners are now left wondering, if a $100,000 luxury SUV can have such a flaw, what does that mean for the rest of us?
Oh, they was talking crazy. Yeah, they didn't have to throw that in at the end. That was kind of messed up. They clowning Jaguar Land Rover. But I've been telling you guys for a long time that the majority of these luxury vehicles are just your standard vehicle cooped up with some luxury emblems. So, it's one of those things. I'm a big Jaguar fan. One of my uncles had a Jaguar when we were in high school, and we enjoyed it a lot. I worked over at the Jaguar dealership here locally for a little bit of a time. I've owned a couple of Jaguars, so I'm a big fan of Jaguar. I've never had a Range Rover, though. Never got into a Range Rover SUV. I'm more of a Dodge Durango kind of guy. But what we're saying is that you got to take your Range Rover and drop it off at the Range Rover dealership near you, because if your knuckle is going to break, then yes, that is going to cause a major accident if it happens while you're driving the vehicle. Specifically, if you're doing highway speeds, that is going to be a major problem. But they said that this recall goes back to upwards of 2014. So, of course, we're going to run into the situation where a lot of people are not going to receive their recall notices, and they're not going to be aware of such things. And worst case scenario is that the person already had this problem and they just fixed it thinking that it was just a normal wear and tear situation with their Range Rover, and they just took care of it, because if you have a Range Rover, dollars to donuts, you got some money on you. So that means that if you were to If it start to make noise or crack, you probably took it to the dealership, changed out the knuckle, which is not that big a change in your suspension system, and just pay it out of pocket for it. Now you have to go through the process of getting reimbursed for that payment. Most guys won't. And that's what the dealership is hoping for. They don't expect you to go through the process of asking them and telling them and finding the receipts that you replaced this knuckle so they can send you money back in 2-3 months or some crazy number like that. And that's kind of the attack on the consumer, as it were, because they know the rub. They know that specifically if your recall is on a 2014, 15, 16, 17 Range Rover, you've gotten that fix. You've heard the noise. You're a person, more than likely, you're a person that takes your vehicle in fairly regularly for maintenance. They pointed out the noise before the TSB came out or before the recall came out. Said, hey, you got to get this fixed. Told you it was $500 to do. And you did it because that's what a good car owner does. But in this situation, you have to be mindful. Now, they definitely have other cars, newer cars that have this situation. And even in those situations, most people are going to just get it fixed. This is a suspension problem. So right off the top of your head, you're not going to think that it's going to be related to a recall because most suspension parts are standard wear and tear. Your tires only come with a certain amount of warranty because the wear on your tires is based on how you drive the vehicle. You're hitting curbs, you're hitting potholes, your alignment's off. Your tires are much like your suspension system. Those kind of systems are duly based off the way you drive. If you are a good driver, your brakes, your suspension, your tires, all these things are really regulated by you because your tires, how fast you're going, how quickly you brake. That's going to talk about how fast they wear out. If you're hitting potholes and knocking your alignment off to the point where you're veering right or left, that's going to cause additional wear on one or the other tire. So these things are not warranted like the standard parts of the vehicle. You don't get your 5-year, 60,000 mile warranty on your tires or your alignment. And even on your suspension system is questionable. Standardly for suspension systems is 3 years, 36,000 miles because that's pretty much the rough shelf life of these such things. And then once after 36,000 miles, of course, you're not going to think about recalls. You're not going to think about TSBs. You're just going to get your car fixed because it's not under warranty anymore and you have no stay to get it fixed by the company unless there's a recall. So it's just one of those situations where you just have to be mindful of what's going on with your vehicle. There's a recall coming out, probably set you a notification on recalls in your vehicle because I'm telling you guys, lots of recalls are going to be coming down the pipeline. Specifically software updates. Lots and lots of software updates. Your cars are just big old computers. All right, so let's keep going. So, Canada. So, there has been a tiff, of course, with Donald Trump and Canada and other countries because of the tariffs. And Canada has been dealing with the tariff for quite some time, and they just refuse to come to the table. They refuse. Carney refuses. He'll say he'll get to it when he'll get to it. But there's still been movement. Canada has started talking to Mexico. They're trying to get together and do their thing. But ultimately, Canada and the exporting from Canada to Canada and all that from the U.S., it's not been going down. And it's been affecting a lot. So we're going to read a quick story from Automotive News, our favorite place to get automotive news. And then we're going to check out a video explain a little bit more about what's going on with Canada and Mexico as they decide that they're going to partner up and go against Trump. So, of course, Automotive News, our favorite place to get all our automotive news. This is from Bloomberg. U.S. auto exports to Canada plummet as number for Mexico rises amid trade war. Okay. Canada imported more vehicles from Mexico than the United States in June for the first time in 3 decades, underscoring the historic shifts underway as the global auto industry grapples with President Donald Trump's tariffs. Canadian importers brought in 1.08 billion of passenger vehicles from Mexico during the month, exceeding the 950 million from the U.S., according to Statistics Canada figures. That's the first time the Mexican auto sector has outsold the U.S. in monthly data going back to the early 1990s. Trump's imposition of 25% tariffs on foreign vehicles has disrupted the long-standing system that mostly allowed the free flow of vehicles and parts across the three North American countries. For cars and trucks shipped under U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, the duty is applied only to the value of non-U.S. content. But that small reprieve has done little to repair the strained relationship between the U.S. and Canada. In retaliation, Canada announced a tariff on U.S.-assembled vehicles in a structure that largely mirrors the White House's move. But the government also provides tariff relief for automakers that keep their manufacturing investment in the country. The shift in Canada's imports is a potential barometer of how Trump's tariffs will reshape the American industry, given that Canada is by far the biggest customer of U.S.-made cars and light trucks. I did not know that. The U.S. ran an auto trade surplus with Canada in 2024, including the parts sector. According to data from the U.S. Commerce Department, American exports of finished vehicles to Canada exceeded exports to Germany, Mexico, and China combined. Damn. Companies such as General Motors and Ford Motor Company generally serve the Canadian market with vehicles made in the U.S. Ford isn't currently making anything at its lone Canadian assembly plant in Ontario, though it has promised it will start making F-Series Super Duty pickups there next year. Why? It's possible that Mexico's rise to number one exporter of vehicles to Canada will be short-lived. Canadian imports of U.S. autos were unusually high in February and March, averaging $2.5 billion over those 2 months, as automakers raced to ship their products before any tariffs came in. Told y'all about that. The companies with monthly average last year of a little more than $1.8 billion. Some big dollar numbers. Major auto manufacturers have largely refrained from broad price increases to offset higher costs from tariffs. Instead, they brought some production to the U.S. or shifted supply chains to sell made-in-America cars to U.S. customers. While the U.S. has recently struck deals with major trading partners, including the European Union, Japan, and South Korea, many of their finer details on the auto trade are yet to be codified. It's important that the uncertainties are cleared up soon, said Aaron Keating, an executive analyst with Cox Automotive Inc. American policymakers need to understand that the U.S. attracts auto manufacturing investment in part because of its place in the larger Northern American supply chain involving Mexico and Canada. Still, there's no sign that Trump will walk back his push to bring more manufacturing to the U.S., an indication that the reshaping of the global auto supply chain will last for years. What we're seeing now is a begrudging acceptance that perhaps this is a new world and we're going to be living with tariffs over the long term, said Brian Kingston, Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association, who added that he's hopeful a better deal can be reached. How do you then manage that? Is there a way to shift production to lower tariffs? Do you pass it on to the consumer? These are all open questions that companies are grappling with, he said. All right. So, Canada is just having a problem with the tariffs that Trump has put in place. I mean, it's one of those things because originally we understood that the tariffs were a negotiation tactic that Trump was using, and Carney and the Mexican president are not going for it. They're agreeing or not. They're not accepting the changes that Trump has put in place, including the tariffs. They think they're getting duped, and Trump is not backing up. Trump is going to keep going straight forward with his tariffs, with his negotiations of these tariffs. And y'all just going to have to come to the table. Canada's Carney has decided that he's not going to come to the table. He's not going to even talk to Trump, not to discuss these things. He's just going to keep moving forward, and that's not a good thing. I mean, mind you, he's switched things up and decided that he's going to get with Mexico and try to figure some other things out. Let's check that out real quick, and then I'm probably going to let y'all get up out of it.
Ambos estamos de acuerdo en que es indispensable.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said on Wednesday that she and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney had agreed to strengthen trade collaboration, particularly in light of the tariffs from U.S. President Donald Trump, set to go into effect on August 1st.
Y compartimos pues algunas.
We both agree that it is essential to respect the USMCA trade agreements, and we shared our experiences about the letter we received from President Trump.
Una carta con 35.
They received a letter with 35% tariffs, and we received one with 30%.
Ellos tienen también una mesa.
Sheinbaum said she and Carney spoke about the strategies both countries were taking to negotiate with the Trump administration ahead of the August 1st deadline. She added that Carney was set to visit Mexico, but that a date had not been set. Trump has sent a flurry of letters in recent days threatening to slap a range of tariffs on U.S. trade partners. He said on Wednesday that the U.S. will stick to the 25% tariffs on Japan announced earlier, and may have another trade deal coming up with India, following a deal with Indonesia.
All right, so now I kind of got a problem with that. I don't like the idea of, the countries closest to us being the countries that are fighting against us when it comes to tariffs and making the world better and, strengthening our borders and all these type of things. And we understand that the part of the reason that Trump came down on Canada and Mexico was because of the border situation, the illegal migration situation, all these type of things. And we figured or kind of saw that stopped and that quailed and everything seemed to be working better. And the migration problem came to a slow halt. I mean, it's still going on, but just not to the effect that it was before. So all of those things are fine and good. But I do have a fear of the idea that the countries closest to us are the ones that are fighting against us the strongest. Maybe it's because they know more about us. Maybe they think that because they're countries that border us, they should get certain privileges, certain aspects of, help that we are not giving to other countries. And as you see, and I hope as they see, when the other countries came to the table and negotiated, their amounts of their tariffs went down or were set at a certain amount and everything went well, but Canada has decided that it's not going to come to the table. And it's just going to, and it continues to be a problem for Canada. They understand how much our import-export in and out of Canada help their economy, to the point where we talked about this a couple of months ago, how bad this is for their economy, specifically when it comes to the automotive industry. But they did try to get themselves a nice little workaround and start getting their product from Mexico, which is, going around your regular drug dealer's house to get to the new drug dealer's house, and then having that new drug dealer go around that house to deliver the product. It creates its own, essential problem, because Mexico is right there. I want to say that, we should be trying our best to negotiate and to work with Canada and Mexico because of their location, because of their closeness to us. But they have to kind of work with us. I'm specifically talking about Canada. I think Mexico is coming to the table. Mexico is cool. But when it comes to Carney and Canada, they have to come to the table. They continue to skirt having the conversation, and they got to have the conversation. You got to have a conversation with Trump. And obviously, if you've seen what's been happening with all the other countries and all the other negotiations that have gone with Trump, they've gone well. They've succeeded. He's did the EU, China. These people have come to the table, made good negotiations. They're not stupid. They came to the table with their negotiation tactics and their negotiation ideas, and they didn't kowtow to Trump. They negotiated and worked it out. And that's just what Canada is going to have to do, or they're going to continue to surpass us and hit Mexico for product, which in the end is going to become more of a problem than it is now. All right, guys, I'm going to let y'all go and get up out of here. It is a pleasure. It is car week out here in California. All these really nice cars are hitting the road, so I got to go to an event here shortly. Might blog or take some pictures for you guys and upload them to YouTube later. Please hit the like, share, subscribe button. I'm your host, Chris Surratt. Hit me in the DMs if you have any questions, and I'm out. Peace.